Welcome back. Senator Mitch McConnell's latest freeze-up is renewing debate now about aging politicians. President Biden himself, the oldest president in history, told reporters he's confident the Senate leader is going to get back to his old self. Meanwhile, an AP NORC poll finds 77% of Americans believe Biden's too old to serve a second term. That includes 69% of Democrats. So let's bring in our panel now. Mike Huckabee, former Arkansas governor and presidential candidate. Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist, also a Fox News contributor. And Tomi Lahren, Fox News contributor, host of Tomi Lahren is Fearless on Outkick. She's also going to co-host the big weekend show Saturday and Sunday. Thanks to you all for being here. Leslie, let's start with you on the stat, pretty eye-opening stat. For Democrats, 69% of them think the president's too old to serve a second term.
But he is the incumbent. He will be the Democratic nominee, and most Democrats will vote for him. When you just look at the exit polling data after the last general elections, pretty much we have a split in our nation, almost divided right down the middle. Left is left, right is right, and that's how they vote. Of course, you have those 5 swing states and those independent voters in those states who put one of those people over the finish line. I'm not surprised about this on the one side, but on the other, it's interesting because you have people on the right like Rand Paul, who says, look, you should only serve 2 terms as a senator. He's starting his 3rd, notice, right? So he'd be grandfathered in, I guess. Nikki Haley, who says that, you know, people like Tommy's age should work longer and should retire later. But then on the other hand, you're too old to be president. So I'm just hearing a lot of mixed signals, not just from my side, but certainly from the other side regarding age, especially with politicians.
Governor, take a listen to what Nikki Haley told me yesterday. I want to get your reaction. What do you say to that?
I agree with her on term limits. I wish we had them in all 3 branches of government. We only have them in one, the executive branch. Nobody ought to go to the government and spend a lifetime there. They ought to go, serve a while, go home and live under the laws they pass for the rest of us. But there's a thing that I think is being missed here. It's not so much age. My gosh, Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney are both in their 80s, and they can dance all over the stage and sing the stars down. Clint Eastwood is in his 90s, for God's sake, still doing movies, producing, directing, acting. So it's not age, it's competency. And when a person is being paid by taxpayers, it's a little different than if they're in the private sector, because we're paying for their salaries. We're needing to pay for someone who can actually function in the job. And I don't care whether they're Democrats or Republicans. They need to be able to show up for work and put in a full day.
Tomi, to that point, what do you think about Nikki Haley's idea that she's floated about a mental acuity test, at least for the presidential candidates?
I don't think that should be necessary, quite honestly. I have a little more faith in the American voter that we wouldn't need something like that. But I do think that there is an interesting question here surrounding term limits. I think that it is wholly selfish for some of these leaders, some of these senators, some of these representatives who believe in taking their seats to the grave. I mean, it's not just Mitch McConnell. It's not just Joe Biden. It's Senator Dianne Feinstein. We're looking at John Fetterman as another one whose age maybe not an issue, but certainly his ability to perform. It's just downright selfish that these people are taking these seats and they're holding on to them and that power. And Mike Huckabee is exactly right about that. You know, we are paying their salaries. We deserve to have people that are serving these positions that can actually serve. You know, I just turned 31 years old. The United States government tells me that I'm too young to run for president because I'm not experienced enough. So if there is an age minimum, certainly there should be an age maximum for those that are clearly not able to serve their country. And when you look at Joe Biden day in and day out, I think that it's quite obvious that he's not able to serve. Even when asked about Mitch McConnell, he turned around to his DHS Secretary Mayorkas and asked him if he was going to run for office. So it's very bizarre what's happening, and age is certainly going to be an issue moving forward. And young voters are particularly concerned about it, I believe, from looking at the reactions we're seeing across social media, and especially when young people are polled on this issue.
The problem, Leslie, with term limits is that the congressional system is built to encourage longevity in office, right? The longer you stay, the older you are, the more senior you become. You accrue all kinds of political benefits when it comes to committee assignments, all kinds of things. So there's very little incentive for lawmakers to step aside once they're seated.
It's shocking that I would agree with the governor and Tommy on a lot of what they just said. But, you know, one of the things that bothers me is we have term limits. It's called voting. And the problem with voters is, again and again, whether it is a local election, a state election, a federal election, you have people on both sides of the aisle just re-electing the same person over and over and over and over. You don't get to be a Joe Biden or a Mitch McConnell without those votes from the people. So I think it's kind of sad that we, the people, the voter, have the power to make term limits a possibility without having to have legislation. And obviously, we have dropped the ball on that. I also want to remind everybody, especially on the right, even if left and right can agree on this, like they did infrastructure and some other things, it won't affect Joe Biden. And obviously, with an election coming up, he's the target. You know, he's the guy they talk about with age. But for the future, I honestly would agree with Tommy. I think the same thing. If you have a minimum age, you should have a maximum age. But also, to the governor's point, there are people that age differently. I've said this before. I worked in my husband's office. He's a physician. I've seen 90-year-olds that play tennis and dance and travel the world. And I've seen 90-year-olds that don't know who they are, don't know who their family is. They're in a wheelchair in a nursing home. We all age differently.
Governor, last word to you.
I worked really hard for this gray hair and gray beard, but I'm not ready to be put out to pasture yet. But if I get to the place where I can't put a sentence together, read from the teleprompter when I can't answer a simple question, then hopefully I'll have the good sense to step aside. One point about people who stay in office. The reason people stay in office is because once you're in, it's hard to get you out. You have the money advantage, you have the incumbency advantage. Term limits would be great if you voted people out, but once you get elected, you can stay elected because you have such power over any challenger who comes against you.
It is a powerful platform. Tommy, I owe you one for next time. Put it on the checklist. We got to leave it there.